Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. Together, the dream had a smell, or at least the one I was trying to build for my parents did. It smelled of warm cinnamon, yeasty bread fresh from the oven, and the dark, comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. For 5 years, that phantom scent had been my silent companion, my motivator. 5 years of skipped weekend trips with friends, of brown bag lunches eaten at my desk while colleagues went out, of meticulously funneling every spare dollar from my engineering job into a dedicated savings account. It wasn't just about the money. The $50,000 I'd finally amassed wasn't just a figure, it was a promise. A gift. A quiet, stubborn hope. It was about giving my parents, Ronan and Sonia, the one thing they'd always wistfully talked about, but never thought possible: a small, cozy bakery of their own. A legacy. I remember one evening, maybe 3 years ago, my mother had sighed while looking out the window of their aging suburban home. Something warm and real to leave behind. She'd murmured, not really speaking to me, but more to the fading sunlight. My father, seated nearby, his hands more used to spreadsheets than dough, had nodded. Sony's Sunrise Bakery, he mused, has a nice ring to it. Their words had planted a seed. And Miles, their ever-responsible, perhaps overly earnest son, had taken it upon myself to make that seed grow. It wasn't just a whim. I'd spent evenings and weekends buried in research demographics of potential neighborhoods, lease rates for small commercial spaces, the cost of used industrial ovens and mixers. I'd found a perfect sun-drenched corner spot on Main Street in a neighboring town. One with good foot traffic and a storefront window practically begging for a display of flaky croissants and colorful cupcakes. The business plan I drafted was thorough, conservative even. I wanted this to work. For them. To give them a joyful, engaging way to spend their retirement years. Something more than just watching daytime TV. The only faint, discordant note in this otherwise harmonious plan was my younger brother, Ryder. Ryder perpetually going through a tough time. Always on the cusp of some brilliant get-rich-quick scheme that inevitably imploded, leaving my parents to wring their hands and, more often than not, dip into their modest savings. I'd learned to tune out the low hum of anxiety that always accompanied thoughts of Ryder. This bakery, this $50,000 gift, was for Mom and Dad. It was their dream, and I was going to deliver it. A quiet pride swelled in my chest whenever I thought about it. I was the fixer, the reliable one, and this felt like the ultimate fix, a truly positive, lasting contribution. The final step was the paperwork. I'd opened a new joint checking account, depositing the full $50,000 into it. I was a signator alongside them, but the funds were clearly earmarked a gift for the bakery startup. The lease application for the Main Street spot was filled out, just needing their signatures and the initial deposit. I had it all in a neat manila folder, ready for our meeting that Sunday afternoon. But the preceding week, my phone calls with them had been off. Mom's voice, usually warm and effusive when discussing the bakery, had a strained, slightly too bright quality. "Oh, Miles, dear, we're so excited to see you Sunday," she chirped. But when I tried to confirm some details about the equipment supplier I'd found, she quickly changed the subject. "Ryder's having a bit of a rough patch again," she said, her voice dipping before bouncing back up. "The leaves are just stunning this year, aren't they?" Dad was even more evasive, brushing off specifics with a gruff, "We'll talk when you get here, son." A small, cold knot of unease had begun to form in my stomach. I tried to push it away, focus on the image of their faces when I laid out the final plans, the joy I hoped would break across their expressions. I even bought a bottle of their favorite Martinelli's sparkling cider, the fancy kind to celebrate. Then, Saturday evening, a text from Ryder lit up my phone. "Heard you're coming over tomorrow. Big news, huh?" The winking emoji fell off, almost mocking. I stared at it for a long moment, the cold knot tightening. Ryder rarely expressed interest in anything I did, let alone with a hint of smugness. I shook my head, telling myself I was overthinking it. This wasn't about him. This was about Mom and Dad. Sunday arrived, a crisp, bright autumn day. As I drove to my parents' house, the one I'd grown up in, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The familiar squeak of the porch swing as a breeze caught it. The vibrant reds and yellows of the maple tree Dad had planted when I was 10. The slightly faded paint on the shutters caught my eye as I approached. It was a house of memories, of scraped knees and birthday cakes, of unspoken anxieties and quiet sacrifices. Today, I hoped it would be a house of pure joy. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The warmth I expected felt absent. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken tension. My parents were in the living room, not with the eager anticipation I'd envisioned, but with a kind of rigid formality. Dad sat perched on the edge of his armchair, and he gripped the armrests. Mom was ramrod straight on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. And there on the other end of the sofa, lounging like he owned the place, was Ryder. A smirk played on his lips, his eyes gleaming with an unreadable, unsettling confidence. The bottle of sparkling cider I placed on the coffee table beside a haphazard stack of old magazines suddenly looked ridiculous, like a child's offering at a funeral. "Hi," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. I tried to summon my smile. "So, I have all the paperwork for the bakery. The account is ready, and the lease application for that spot on Main Street." I held up the manila folder, my smile feeling like a badly fitting mask. Mom wrung her hands, her gaze darting between me, Dad, and Ryder. "Miles, dear," she began, her voice trembling slightly. We need to talk." Dad cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. He wasn't looking at me. He stared somewhere over my left shoulder. "Son," he said, voice flat, "there's been a change of plans with the money." The cold knot in my stomach solidified into a block of ice. My smile dissolved. "A change of plans?" I repeated. The words tasted like ash. "What do you mean?" "Everything's set up." Across the room, Ryder's smirk widened. He looked like a cat who'd not only cornered the canary but had already feasted on it. My father, Ronan, finally met my gaze. His eyes held a mix of discomfort and a strange steely resolve I hadn't anticipated. "Well, son," he began, slipping into that carefully reasonable tone he used when delivering bad news, "your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking. And Ryder really needs our help right now. Desperately." Beside him, my mother Sonia nodded. Her eyes were wide, glassy with a kind of frantic hope, pleading with me, as if begging for an understanding I couldn't yet fathom. "He's gotten himself into a bit of a scrape again, Miles," she said softly, her voice a low, anxious murmur. "Some debts. He just needs a fresh start, dear. A real chance this time. He's promised. He always promised." That was Ryder's currency: promises. Promises that cracked like cheap glass the moment any pressure was applied. A cold dread began to crawl up my spine, slow and sharp, prickling at the base of my neck. "Trouble?" I asked. My voice came out barely audible. My throat felt tight, constricted. "What kind of trouble?" I looked between them. "And what does this have to do with the bakery money?" The manila folder in my hands felt suddenly heavy. Not with paper, but with failure. With betrayal. Its contents carefully typed documents, signed checks, visions for something good now meaningless. It was Ryder who spoke next. Of course it was. His voice oozed with that infuriating entitlement I'd known since we were kids. "Look, it's simple, big brother," he said, pushing himself up slightly from his lazy sprawl on the couch. There was a casual arrogance in the way he moved, as though he'd already won, as though this was merely a formality. "I need the cash to clear things up, get some breathing room, get back on my feet." Dad and Mom agreed it's more important right now than some dusty old bakery. "Dusty old bakery," I echoed, staring at him. Then I turned to my parents. Disbelief warred with a dawning, sickening comprehension. "You're saying you're giving the $50,000. My $50,000 that I saved for 5 years, for your bakery, to Ryder?" The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. I could barely breathe around them. My father's expression changed. The discomfort vanished, replaced by something cold, and set his jaw hard, his eyes steady. That steely pragmatism I remembered from his tougher talks, the voice he used when laying down final decisions. "Your brother needs a second chance, Miles," he said. Each word was clipped, final, like a gavel striking. "You're always successful. You land on your feet. You'll be fine. This is for family. Family helps family." The phrase, once a warm mantra in our household whispered over soups brought to sick relatives, shouted with joy on Christmas mornings, now sounded like a cruel joke. A justification for the unjustifiable. My success, my hard work, was being used as a weapon against me. A reason to dismiss my contribution. My gift. Then Mom added her voice to it. Trembling, but firm. The two of them, united. "He promised this is the last time, Miles," she said. "He's truly going to turn his life around with this. He just needs this one big break." Her eyes implored me, pleading for some shared faith I couldn't feel. All I could see was the bottomless pit of enabling, of rationalizations and soft landings that Ryder would happily drag them, and now me, into. A roaring started in my ears, a dull, rushing sound that drowned out everything else. For a moment, the betrayal wasn't just an emotion. It was physical. A fist clenched around my heart, squeezing the breath from my lungs. My chest tightened, like someone had wrapped barbed wire around it, and kept twisting. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was feel it. The collapse of everything I had built, believed in. The bakery, my bakery, wasn't just a business plan. It was late nights spent tweaking recipes. It was daydreams about the smell of cinnamon rolls in the morning, the hum of conversation over coffee, the kind of quiet happiness that builds a life. Now it was just smoke, bitter, acrid smoke. Ryder's words, my parents' blank agreement, had reduced it to ash. I could feel the sting behind my eyelids, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of them. A cold fury began to build, pushing the grief aside, replacing shock with something sharper. I looked around the living room, suddenly seeing it for the first time in years. The walls, once familiar, felt like they were pressing in. Every photo on the mantelpiece now seemed to leer at me. Me missing my front teeth, grinning, Ryder on his tricycle, cheeks flushed with pride, the whole family at a beach, all sunburn and smiles. They looked like strangers, or worse, liars. They mocked me now. I said nothing. The silence stretched. My parents watched me expectant, tight-jawed. Ryder smirked less now, but his eyes still gleamed, like he was daring me to make a scene. Maybe they thought I'd argue. Maybe they were waiting for the same tired routine. Me, trying to keep peace. Me, swallowing anger like medicine. But something in me had cracked. No, it had broken. And whatever part of me used to care about preserving that illusion, it was gone. I looked at the folder in my lap, the neat little dream I'd poured 5 years into. It felt fake now, like a prop in someone else's life. I glanced at the bottle of sparkling cider on the coffee table, still untouched, its bright label incongruously cheerful in the dim room. Without a word, I stood. My body moved stiffly, like I was wearing someone else's skin. I could feel their eyes on me, Dad, Mom, Ryder watching, unsure, waiting for what I'd do. I picked up the folder. Heavy, not with paper, but with everything that had just been stripped from me. I picked up the bottle of cider. My hands didn't shake. When I finally spoke, my voice was unnervingly calm, detached, a voice I barely recognized as my own. I see. Nothing more. No questions. No argument. No begging. I turned, walked to the front door. No one stopped me. The click of the latch as it closed behind me was soft, almost gentle, but in the thick, charged silence, it sounded like a gunshot. I didn't look back. The slam of my car door broke the spell. A punctuation mark, harsh and final. It echoed louder than anything they'd said, louder than family helps family, louder than Ryder's smirking plea. It was the only sound that felt real. I didn't drive away right away. Instead, I pulled over a few houses down, just far enough that they wouldn't see me through the front windows, wouldn't come running out with weak apologies, or worse, more rationalizations. My breath came in shallow gasps, sharp and quick, as if I'd just surfaced from deep underwater. I didn't realize I was shaking until the tremors rattled the keys in the ignition. Shock has its own delayed current. It waits for a moment of stillness to wash over you like ice. Then something inside me snapped into focus. Not rage exactly. Not yet. But cold, clear resolve. I reached for my phone. My fingers were slick with sweat, slipping against the screen as I unlocked it. I opened the banking app. My heart thudded against my ribs like it wanted out of my chest. That joint account, the one I had set up with cautious optimism, imagining shared decisions, shared ownership, appeared on the screen, right where I'd left it. And there it was, $50,000. Still sitting there, pristine, untouched. They hadn't even looked at it yet. That was how confident they were. How entitled. They believed it was already theirs. I stared at the number. It looked foreign now, like a lie I'd told myself. With fingers steadier than I expected, I tapped through the prompts. Transferred every cent. Not a penny left behind. My savings account accepted it like a lifeboat taking on a survivor. Transaction pending. A pause. One shallow breath. Transaction complete. A small sound escaped me, a sigh, barely audible. It wasn't relief. It wasn't victory. It was grief wearing the mask of composure. The anger, quiet and coiled, began to spread. Righteous. Steady. No longer a chaotic storm, but a slow burn. I shifted the car into gear and pulled away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I could see it all in my mind. The house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now standing behind me like a tombstone. A monument to a betrayal I hadn't deserved. They didn't know yet. Back in that living room, I could imagine them sitting around, the air awkward but satisfied. They probably thought I was sulking. Hurt, yes, but eventually always willing to fall in line. I could picture their shared relief that I hadn't made a scene, hadn't disrupted the narrative. Ryder, smug and coiled like a cat who thinks he's won, probably leaned back and smirked. Guess he took it better than I thought. He would have said, tossing a look between them. Told you he wouldn't fight. My mother might have nodded slowly, worry momentarily dulled by denial. He just needs time to come around, she'd say softly, wringing her hands. And Ryder, never one to wait, would have started pushing. All right, come on, he'd say. I could hear the impatience in his voice, already tapping his fingers against his thigh, maybe even snapping. Let's get this done. I've got people waiting, you know. Promises to keep. My father sighing. Always sighing would have moved to his desk, muttering something about doing it now, just to get it over with. And then he would have opened his old, wheezing laptop. I could see it clearly, as if I were standing in the room with them, invisible and vindicated. My mother would be hovering just behind my father, peering over his shoulder, fingers pressed anxiously to her lips. There'd be a nervous flutter in her chest, that same breathless tightness she always got when things started to spin out of control. Then Ronan no, Dad would squint at the screen. I knew the look. Mouth tightening, jaw shifting like he might chew on the problem itself. That's odd, he'd murmur, leaning in, his glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose. He'd adjust them with the same middle finger he used to wag at us when we were kids. Sonia, Mom sharp as ever when fear took hold, would snap, 0? What do you mean 0? She'd say it with that forced, rising pitch, as if volume would change the numbers on the screen. Dad would fumble with the mouse, clicking through transaction history. And then I imagined it hit him, like it hit me when they said Ryder would be getting the money. The color would drain from his face. He took it back. He'd whisper, barely audible. Miles, he took all the money back. Silence for a second. That awful, vacuum silence. Then, Ryder's voice, rising to a shriek. He what? I could almost hear it, his disbelief curdling into rage. A high-pitched, breaking fury. That ungrateful, selfish scumsucker. He'd jump up, his body coiled tight, pacing already, a storm in too small a room. After everything? You told me you promised I was getting it. I pictured him rounding on them, eyes wild, lips twisted. Maybe a fist slamming down on the coffee table, sending the old stack of National Geographics skittering across the floor. This is your fault. He'd scream. You should have made him agree right then and there. You always let him walk all over you. You're too soft on him, useless. My parents, frozen, stunned, wouldn't know where to look. For a moment, they'd just sit there, shocked into silence by the rawness of Ryder's tantrum. Then the panic would start to set in. Mom, always theatrical in her grief, would begin to cry. I didn't have to imagine the sound, I'd heard it my whole life. Trembling, high-pitched, thick with implication. How could he do this to us? To his own brother? She'd moan, rocking slightly, eyes darting to Dad as if pleading for him to explain it. After all we've done for him. Dad would be pale, caught somewhere between impotent anger and a deeper, crawling fear. Not for me. Not even for Ryder. But for the people Ryder had mentioned, those vague friends or investors who sounded a little too much like loan sharks. His mind would be racing. Not just about Ryder's future, but their own. The lie, the bakery, the business, the fresh start would be gone, disintegrated. All that would be left was the reality they had ignored. The truth I had felt brewing beneath every one of Ryder's slick reassurances. Debts. Shadows. Threats. And now? Now they were left holding the bag. Ryder's voice would rise again, frantic and cracked. Do you even know what they'll do to me? They said this week, Dad. You said it'd be handled. The perfect little fiction of our family, happy smiles on Christmas cards, polite birthday calls, yearly vacations shattered. The pieces, sharp and accusing, turned inward now. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun was almost down. I parked in the lot behind the building, sat there for a while, listening to the faint ticking of the cooling engine, and then went inside. I had just dropped my keys on the counter when my phone buzzed. Dad flashed across the screen. I stared at it, the name almost unreal now, a label that no longer meant what it used to. My thumb hovered over the answer button. The phone buzzed again, insistent. And then, slowly, deliberately, I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, it buzzed again. Mom. I didn't even hesitate this time. I did the same, let it ring out and go to voicemail. Then came the flood. First was Dad. His voice came through the speaker, clipped and low, the fury barely concealed. Miles, you need to explain yourself. Now. What the hell is going on? A pause, a shuffle of breath like he was trying to rein himself in. This isn't just some childish stunt. You need to fix this. Fix this mess you've made. By the end of the message, that anger had cracked into something wearier, thinner. We're in a real bind here. You don't understand the position you've put us in. Please, Miles. Just call us back. Then came Mom. Her voice, wet with tears, though even now, I could hear the rehearsed tremble beneath it. The tone she always slipped into when she needed something. The tone designed to make me feel small. I don't understand how you could be so cruel, Miles. You've torn this family apart. A sniffle. Ryder is devastated. Absolutely terrified. And your father, he's trying to hold everything together, but I don't know how much more we can take. How could you do this? After everything? How could you be so heartless? Each message was like a pinprick, tiny sharp jabs that might once have broken skin. But not now. Not anymore. The wound left by their betrayal, the casual way they had offered my money to cover Ryder's mess, without even asking, was too vast, too deep. I didn't even bleed from these anymore. I stared at my phone for a moment, then typed out a message and sent it to both of them. The money was for the bakery. Since there is no bakery, the money is back with me. This is not up for discussion. Then I blocked their numbers. Both. I needed the silence. I needed space. Some sliver of peace to let the chaos settle. A moment to breathe and absorb the reality of what I'd just done, what they'd done. And then I made the first call I needed to make. Scarlett, I said the moment she picked up. Hey, Miles. You okay? No, I said honestly. And then, like a dam had broken, the whole story came rushing out of me, every detail, from the fake bakery to the way they'd manipulated me, to the way Ryder had erupted when he found out I'd reclaimed the money. My voice cracked more than once, no matter how tightly I tried to hold it together. Scarlett, my oldest friend, the one who never let me sugarcoat things, listened without interruption. When I finally stopped talking, there was a long silence. Then, flatly, good for you. What? Good for you, Miles. Finally. My God. They've been taking advantage of your good nature for years. That brother of yours and your parents? They just let him. Every time. So what are you going to do now? Her words hit me like a bomb. Clear, calm, unsentimental. The voice of sanity amid the wreckage. I didn't know what I was going to do. Not yet, but at least someone saw the truth. At least one person didn't make me feel crazy. Still, even with Scarlett's voice echoing in my head, that night was brutal. Alone in my apartment, the light low, the silence too sharp, it all came crashing down. The magnitude of what had happened, the rupture in the ground beneath me, the knowledge that my family had lied, manipulated, and turned on me when I refused to play along, that they had chosen Ryder again over doing what was right. This was rock bottom. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Aunt Patricia. I hesitated, then answered. I hadn't blocked her. Miles. Her voice was low, worried. Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, but I just got off the phone with Sonia. She was, well, hysterical. I didn't say anything. She told me that, she said you promised Ryder a large sum of money, that he was in some kind of terrible trouble, and at the last minute you cruelly snatched it away, leaving him in serious danger. She said. Patricia hesitated, her voice dipping even lower, like she hated to say it. She said you were always difficult. Ungrateful. The words hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just angry, they were actively trying to destroy my reputation, twisting the narrative to paint me as the villain, themselves and Ryder as the victims. My chest tightened, as if someone had wrapped barbed wire around my lungs. A wave of nausea washed over me. I stared at the family photo on my nightstand, a relic from a happier, or perhaps just more oblivious time, and felt a profound sense of isolation settle in. Was I the bad guy? Was I being unreasonable? The carefully constructed walls of their family unit had closed ranks, and I was on the outside, shivering in the cold. The house I'd grown up in. Every memory suddenly felt foreign, every smiling photo, every accusation. Then that evening, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. Miles, her voice was raw, hysterical, almost unrecognizable. Miles, you have to help him. No, Mom, I said firmly. I told you no. You listen, she shrieked, the panic spilling out in a torrent. We already promised them the people Ryder owes. We promised them he'd have it by tomorrow. Your father even gave his word, Miles. Based on your $50,000. He told them it was as good as in Ryder's account before you even came over to sign those bakery papers. We thought you'd understand. We thought you'd just agree. You have to give it back. I stood frozen, the phone pressed hard against my ear. The air in my apartment seemed to grow colder, thinner. Before I even came over to sign those bakery papers, they hadn't just diverted the funds, they had preemptively committed my money, my life savings, based on a grotesque assumption of my compliance. The entire Sunday meeting, their feigned interest in the bakery, their talk of a change of plans, it had all been an elaborate, contemptible charade. The betrayal wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was premeditated, calculated. My stomach churned. Mom, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Did you hear what you just said? There was a choked sob on the other end. Then a click. She'd hung up. I sank onto my sofa, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. A cold, terrible clarity began to form amidst the wreckage of my emotions. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. I immediately called Scarlett, my voice shaking as I recounted what my mother had just blurted out. Oh, Miles, she breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of pity and outrage. This is beyond just family drama now. They fraudulently committed your funds. You need to document every single thing. Every call, every text, every cent. What else have they been hiding from me all these years? I interrupted, the question hanging in the air, ominous and heavy. What else, indeed, Scarlett replied grimly. Fueled by a new, chilling anger and Scarlett's pragmatic guidance, I began to dig. I pulled out old boxes of bank statements I'd kept for tax purposes, scrolled through archived emails on my laptop, forced myself to sift through memories I'd long suppressed or minimized. It was like picking at a scab, knowing it would bleed but needing to see the extent of the wound. The pattern that emerged was sickening. There was the $5,000 loan to Ryder supposedly for a coding boot camp he never attended. An email from Mom, full of praise for my generosity. Then the $3,000 for emergency car repairs after Ryder had been caught street racing a hasty withdrawal from my savings that Dad had guaranteed would be repaid. And then the big one, the one that made my blood run cold. My college fund bonds. I'd always assumed a small portion had been used for tuition, the rest reinvested as my parents had told me. But sifting through ancient emails, I found it a carefully worded message from my mother from nearly 15 years ago. She'd borrowed her word a substantial 5-figure sum from those bonds to cover one of Ryder's earliest significant gambling debts. She'd filled the email with manipulative platitudes. "You're such a good son, Miles. Always so understanding. We'll pay it back with interest, of course. This is just a temporary measure to help your brother get back on his feet." The repayment, of course, never materialized. The interest was a cruel fiction. They had actively lied to me about it for years, telling me it was growing in a secure investment. My own future casually plundered for my perpetually failing brother. The total, including the $50,000, was staggering. They hadn't just enabled Ryder, they had systematically drained me. Just as I was staring at that damning old email, my screen heavy with the weight of its implications, Aunt Patricia called again. Her voice was hesitant, laced with guilt. "Miles," she said softly, "I have to tell you something else. I feel terrible. Ronan and Sonia, they knew Ryder was in deep with loan sharks for weeks before you even mentioned the bakery money. They were frantic. I overheard them talking. They were specifically discussing how your offer for the bakery was Ryder's only way out. How they could convince you the money was for their dream when really it was always meant for Ryder's debts from the get-go." She paused, then added, "I'm so sorry, Miles. I should have warned you. I was a coward." Her words were like the final tumblers clicking into place in a very ugly lock. The bakery dream wasn't just sidelined or opportunistically hijacked. It was a deliberate, cynical ploy, a carefully baited trap for my known generosity. My $50,000 wasn't a fortunate windfall for Ryder. It was the precise target of their desperate, manipulative scheme. The depth of their deception was breathtaking. Armed with this arsenal of chilling truths, my mother's unwitting admission, the concrete evidence of the depleted college fund, the long list of past loans, and Aunt Patricia's corroborating testimony, I knew what I had to do. The thought of a confrontation filled me with a mixture of dread and a grim, steely resolve. Scarlett, ever loyal, insisted on being there. Mr. Chun, the lawyer Scarlett had referred me to after my mother's hysterical call, had already drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter to my parents regarding any further harassment, affirming my legal right to my retrieved funds. He advised that one final clear statement of my position, in person with a witness, might be the cleanest way to sever this toxic financial entanglement. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. A small, neutral meeting room at a local community center. Not my apartment, and certainly not their house, which now felt like enemy territory. They arrived together, Ronan, Sonia, and Ryder. My father's face was a mask of grim displeasure. My mother looked pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed, darting nervously around the sterile room. Ryder slouched in his chair, radiating a belligerent, resentful energy that filled the room like a storm cloud. They probably thought they could still bully or guilt-trip me into submission. They had no idea what I now knew. Scarlett sat beside me, a quiet pillar of support, her notepad and pen ready. "Miles," my father began, his voice low and growly, "this has gone far enough. You are tearing this family apart over money." I let the accusation hang in the air for a moment, then met his gaze, my own steady and cold. "No, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly firm, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. "You, Mom." I nodded toward them both, "and Ryder tore this family apart long before today. This isn't just about the $50,000. I paused, then began to lay it all out, piece by damning piece. "Mom, on Tuesday evening you called me, and you admitted that you and Dad had already promised my $50,000 to Ryder's creditors before I even came over on Sunday. You admitted the bakery discussion was a charade." Sonia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ronan shot her a furious glare, but I continued, my gaze unwavering. "There's the matter of my college fund." I slid a printed copy of the old email across the table. "This email from 15 years ago details how you borrowed a significant sum for Ryder's debts, money you told me was safely invested and growing. It was never repaid." I then produced a concise list of the other loans' dates and amounts clearly itemized. This bakery idea wasn't a dream you cherished. It was a lie, a calculated scheme to get $50,000 from me to bail Ryder out yet again. My father started to bluster, his face flushing a dark red. How dare you? How dare you accuse your mother and me? So what if they did? Ryder suddenly snarled, leaping to his feet, his voice cracking with desperate, entitled rage. It's just money. You always had it easy, Miles. You always had more than enough. It's not fair that you have so much and I have nothing. His outburst, his shocking admission hung in the sterile air of the meeting room. Scarlett's pen scratched quietly on her notepad. My mother was openly weeping now, silent tears streaming down her face. My father looked utterly defeated, the fight draining out of him as he stared at his younger son. I looked at Ryder, then back at my parents, a profound, sorrowful clarity washing over me. It was my money, Ryder, I said, my voice quiet but heavy, carrying years of resentment earned through my work, my sacrifices, and this family's betrayals. I shifted my gaze to Mom and Dad. The bank of Miles, I stated each word deliberately, is permanently closed. I slid copies of the documented loans and the college fund email across the table toward them. We have nothing further to discuss. The silence that followed my declaration was heavy, suffocating. Ryder's face contorted into a mask of impotent fury. He let out a string of curses and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls seemed to vibrate. Good riddance. His departure felt like a pressure valve being released, though the atmosphere remained thick with unspoken recriminations and the wreckage of what used to be our family. My father, Ronan, who had always seemed so imposing, so in control, now looked small and deflated. He stared at the papers on the table, the evidence of their long deception, as if seeing them for the first time. He didn't meet my eyes. My mother, Sonia, was still weeping, but her sobs were quieter now, a mournful, defeated sound. There was no apology, no flicker of remorse in their expressions. Only the dull shock of exposure, perhaps a dawning understanding of the finality of my words. Or maybe it was just self-pity. At that point, I honestly didn't care to distinguish. Scarlett quietly gathered her notes. I stood up. I think we're done here, I said, my voice devoid of anger now, just a profound weariness. I didn't wait for a response. Scarlett and I walked out, leaving them amidst the ruins of their own making. As we stepped out into the afternoon sun, I took a deep breath. The air felt cleaner, lighter, despite the hollowness in my chest. The fight, the one I hadn't even known I was in for so many years, was finally over. I had drawn my line, not in sand, but in solid stone. Later that day, a text message from Aunt Patricia appeared on my phone. Heard you stood your ground. Takes more courage than you know. Some truths are hard, but necessary. I'm proud of you, Miles. Her words were a small comfort, a reminder that not all family connections were built on lies. In the weeks and months that followed, I maintained a strict no-contact policy. It was hard. There were moments, especially late at night, when a pang of something akin to guilt, or perhaps just old habit, would surface. But then I'd remember the calculated betrayal, the years of being a convenient resource, and the feeling would harden back into resolve. I started therapy, something I probably should have done years ago. Unpacking decades of family dynamics, of being the responsible one, the good son who was expected to absorb every shock and fill every gap, was painful, but incredibly liberating. And the $50,000? It sat in my savings account, a symbol of my reclaimed independence. After much thought, I decided to invest a portion of it wisely for my own future. With another part, I booked a trip I'd always dreamed of but had continually postponed, a hiking expedition through Patagonia. The stark, beautiful landscapes, the physical challenge, the feeling of being small against the grandeur of nature, it all helped to clear my head, to put things in perspective. I even used a small amount to enroll in an advanced course related to my engineering field, something I'd put off because I was always saving for something else. This time, that something else was me. My friendship with Scarlett deepened. She, along with a few other trusted friends and a surprisingly supportive Aunt Patricia, became my redefined family, people who offered mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care without expectation or manipulation. The emotional transformation was gradual but profound. The initial hurt and raw betrayal slowly gave way to a righteous anger, which then fueled a determined, strategic resolve. That resolve, once acted upon, eventually led to a sense of peace, a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. I mourned the idealized family I thought I'd lost, the one I desperately tried to hold together. But in its place, I began to embrace the healthier, more authentic life I was building for myself. I realized my self-worth wasn't tied to their approval or my role as the family savior. It was inherent. Through Aunt Patricia, I heard snippets of news about my parents, and Ryder always relayed with a kind of gentle reluctance on her part. Ryder predictably faced severe repercussions for his debts once my financial tap was definitively turned off. There were no more bailouts. Aunt Patricia told me my parents were struggling both financially and emotionally. Their relationship was strained, burdened by the full, unmitigated weight of Ryder's problems and their own complicity in the mess. Their carefully maintained social standing in our small community also took a hit. Truth, even when whispered, has a way of seeping out, and people, especially in close-knit circles, can piece things together. Aunt Patricia mentioned that some old family friends were keeping their distance from my parents. I felt no gloating when I heard this. No sense of vindictive pleasure, just a sad, quiet acknowledgement that these were the natural, inevitable consequences of their choices and actions. Years have passed now. I'm thriving. My career has advanced, and I'm in a healthy, loving relationship with a wonderful woman who respects my boundaries as much as I respect hers. I found a deep sense of peace. The bakery dream, that once potent symbol of my filial devotion, is now just a distant, bittersweet memory. It reminds me not of failure, but of a crucial lesson learned. You cannot force others to live up to your ideals of them, nor can you sacrifice your own well-being on the altar of their dysfunction. All you can control are your own choices, your own actions, and your own path to healing. The $50,000 was, in the end, the price of my freedom, the tuition for an invaluable education in self-respect and the true meaning of family. It was a steep price, paid in heartache and disillusionment, but the return on that investment, my peace, my autonomy, my authentic self, has been immeasurable. It took losing a substantial sum of money and the family I thought I knew to finally find myself, to understand what genuine strength and healthy relationships look like. It makes me wonder, what's the toughest boundary you've ever had to set, perhaps even with people you loved? And how did that act of courage ultimately change your life? Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.